Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the latest installment of The Other Leg, Andy's Music Vault, the other channel that I do everything outside of Paul McCartney and Wings and the like. And we have a returning guest to this channel. I believe he was on two installments, I think, or maybe one or two, maybe about a year or so ago, maybe two.
You have so many podcasts going, I get mixed up which one I've been on.
Yeah, well, it's only been this one, I think.
I think it was on the two legs a couple of times too.
You know what? You were. I think you were on two legs a couple times as well, too. Yes, you were. Live, I think you were one. Yeah, you joined us live one time. That's right.
That was good fun.
Yeah, but we have Mr. Bob Davison joining us again. Bob, good evening. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Andy.
And Friday night, Bob and I took a trip into New York City to see the Genesis tribute band, The Musical Box. And this, I believe, there it is right there. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. That was the album that they played in full. And in actual fact, is the last time that The Musical Box is going to be playing that album. They are retiring it for forever. So they're playing it. They played it after us, and I think that was it, according to their website.
I would imagine, Andy, that's quite a bit of work to perform, having watched them do it. Really,
yeah,
almost 2 hours straight, no break.
right.
Quite a bit of work.
No intermission. So, Bob, this was your first experience seeing this tribute band, and given your background into early progressive rock, you were a fan of it in the '70s. What was your overall take on the band and the evening?
I thought the band was absolutely outstanding. I thought they were obviously well prepared. They knew the material. They loved the material. All of them are gifted musicians. You could see that. I'm not a musician, but I know one when I see one. And the members of that band are clearly gifted musicians. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is really one of my, probably a top 20 album of all time. To me, it's both a masterpiece and confusing at the same time. I can't really tell you what it's about.
Nope.
But when I listened to it and when I saw it live on Friday night, particularly with the slideshow and all the photographs, from the original show that Genesis did, it just elicits so many different images that it's just a wonderful experience. And I will listen to the album again this week at some point.
Of course, it is a very, very, very complex piece of music that it doesn't make a lot of sense. There is a little bit of a narrative you can follow. Okay, there's a hero, there's a story. I know that Peter Gabriel was channeling the film El Topo, which was a really big film in 1970. A lot of people were influenced by it. So Jabberwocky, things like that. So it's set in New York City. I mean, the fact that we did see it on Broadway was pretty cool. That was pretty special to see that done
Times
there.
Square, right there, sure.
Right in Times Square. That band has everything covered down to the mannerisms, to the dialogue, to the costumes, to the phrasing. It wasn't just a band. They were reproducing what Genesis played in 1975. And they did it without any video footage, because there's very little of it. As I was telling you when we were leaving the venue, there's not that much. There was not a full recorded show of that, so all they could go by was people what they told them and the little bit of information they had. But it was reproduced authentically.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I know The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's a series of songs and movements, but to me, particularly when you see it live, it's just one big song.
Right. It's not right. It flows throughout the whole thing.
Right. And, it flows like a river flowing. And I said the show was almost 2 hours. I know that because I checked as the show ended. I could have sat there for another 2 hours. I was having no problems sitting.
Yeah. It's a spacey record. It's very atmospheric. That's a great observation on the one song. It's one song because a lot of it much of the album does link together like that all the way through.
The other thing I like about going to progressive rock shows is that the audience is so respectful. I mean, I get it. Some rock and roll shows, you're on your feet, you scream and have a good time. That's great. But when you go see The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, that's not really the forum for that. And I thought the fans were just so respectful, staying in their seats, listening, not talking during the
Yes.
show. Andy, how many shows have we been to where the people next to us, they paid $150 to see Bob Dylan or Paul McCartney or whoever, and they're sitting there talking? I'm
I
like,
know.
for the love of God,
Shut up.
shut up.
Amateur night, as you like to
Amateur night.
affectionately call it.
Yeah. It's just, particularly with certain artists, you have to sit there. You go see Springsteen jump around, scream. That's fine. The Rolling Stones, that's fine.
That's again.
But some artists, you have to really listen to what's going on.
And those progressive artists really appreciate that. That was a very learned audience, I would
It really
say.
was. Yeah.
For the most part, I would say there was about 1,500, 2,000 people tops at this venue, Nokia Theater, Times Square, Palladium. It's been 1,000 different things.
Well, while we were sitting there before the show, I was listening because you can't help but hear some of the people around us just talking, and it was like going to a school of progressive rock, just talking about the various shows and the albums. And you were probably the youngest person in the audience. most people were my age or older. They were talking about seeing ELP and King Crimson and all those acts, Renaissance back in the 70s, what their favorite songs were. So that was a interesting experience as well.
A proggy nerd kind of grouping of.
It was a proggy nerd night for sure, and you and I fit right in.
We certainly did. Talk about some of the elaborate costumes, particularly in the later stages of the show. That was pretty mesmerizing, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it was very mesmerizing. And as I sat there looking at it, I started to think, if I remember correctly, the album came out in '74. The tour was in '75.
Yes.
In some ways, it was a precursor to the punk rock movement. The way the punk rockers came out and just got in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often thought that about Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review tour in '75 too, where Dylan just had the band right out in front.
Right.
The instruments weren't necessarily tuned. Everyone playing at once. He had the white face going, the
paint face. Yeah.
In many ways, I think those two tours influenced what happened in England and in the United States in regards to the punk rock movement, what the Clash did, and the Ramones and acts like that. I think they were influenced by those two tours.
Especially when you look at the character of the character Rail of the Lamb is a punk. He's supposed to be a street punk. He's got the leather jacket look going. So that's
you could argue that goes back to the Who.
Sure.
Media, one album and one act builds upon the other.
Right.
And I certainly think that the Who and the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, the Velvet Underground, some of Dylan's work really led to the punk movement.
Interesting. Some of the highlights of the night songs on the songs. What were some of your favorites that you enjoyed?
Carpet Crawler.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the highlight of the night for me. And some of the darker stuff that I think really played well live.
Yeah.
On the album, sometimes it's a little macabre, but live, I thought it held up very well.
Yeah, and I thought they were going to take an intermission, but they didn't in between because the record is 2 records, and you think after record 1, because these guys aren't spring chickens either. The musical box has been going for 30 years.
I'd have to say they were about 60, all in good shape, but they like me, they got a few miles on them.
Now, to one of the cooler parts of the whole night, which wasn't even at the concert.
No, it wasn't.
It was in the car ride going in. Now,
yeah, so let me set the stage. We're driving through a residential. There it is. We're driving through a residential neighborhood in Cedar Grove, New Jersey. And as any listener to this podcast knows, Andy is an expert in music. And furthermore, he's an expert in all things Beatles. So I said to Andy, Andy, what do you think about this new last Beatles song I've been hearing about that apparently is being produced with artificial intelligence, things of that nature? And we were talking about that. And no surprise, Andy happened to have the John Lennon bootleg that the new Beatles song is based upon. And as you told me the story last night, it's a piano demo John and the Piano, that he recorded sometime in 1980, shortly before his tragic death. So we started listening to that, which is probably about as obscure as a Beatle related bootleg that you can have. I don't recall ever having heard it anywhere. So we're listening to that, and I look to my right, and in a house in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Cedar Grove, they have this Art Deco Imagine sign on the front of their house. I go, Andy, look at that. And you turned and looked, and I have to say, you were a bit stunned.
Yeah.
I forget exactly what you said, but you went, man, that's weird.
Something to that effect.
And then you said, you can't make
Creepy.
that up.
I think I said it was creepy.
Creepy. That's right. I said, that's creepy. So I don't know what that all means, but that was beyond wild.
We were listening to the track. The track wasn't even over yet, and you looked and said, look what that says. It says Imagine.
Right. And yeah, we talk about the Beatles a lot, but I think it's the first time we ever talked about a John Lennon demo.
And such a one as that, as obscure as that, right?
Right. And then you happen to have it on your phone.
Yeah.
Which is impressive, by the way.
Yeah. So that was leading into going to see Genesis. So that's like a moment that'll be ingrained forever. I'll never forget that moment where we only a couple miles away from you.
Right.
To go into it, but that was a cool story to go into. A fun evening and to see a classic work that was done from start to finish. I thought the guy who played the guy who played the drums, who was Phil Collins, I think he was the second strongest musician on the stage. I think
phenomenal.
If not the strongest.
Yeah, good singer, great drummer. I think he played other mouth organs. I couldn't quite tell what they were.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
they were all great.
Reproduced all the parts perfectly. Genesis in the '70s was not a band that was going to jump around. Like there was not like those guys were just musicians, and they sat or they stood and played their instruments.
Well, Steve Hackett in particular sat during that era, didn't he?
Sat.
Yeah.
He just sat down. So Tony Banks played his keyboards, and was kind of very not expressionless. Because that music is so complex. You don't have time to be partying and around and dancing and everything else, So that leads to people like Peter Gabriel doing all these antics with his costumes and everything else, because those guys are such statues playing. You've got to keep the audience engaged. Phil Collins later did this when he took over too, but Peter did a good job of that. I mean, some of that costume, that green monster outfit costume was ridiculous.
That's why he's Peter Gabriel. I think I was telling you at the show Friday night, when I saw Gabriel live about 20 years ago, he was, bouncing around in his big plastic ball. And my friend Dean, who
Yep.
said to me, why is Peter doing that? I said, I have no idea.
There's no rhyme or reason to it. And it's no wonder that The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was Peter Gabriel's last musical statement with Genesis. There was nothing else he could contribute after that.
Right. I think he was going more and more solo as part of Genesis.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And you know what? They both did pretty well. Genesis and Peter Gabriel. They both.
Yeah, Peter Gabriel went on to.
Yeah,
he became a fantastic musician in his own right. And Genesis reached stupid commercial success after he left. So
I think Peter Gabriel is one of those artists, and taking nothing away from the Genesis after Peter Gabriel. But I think Peter Gabriel is one of those artists they're going to be talking about 200 years from now. I think he's going to have that type of lasting influence.
I think he totally agree. He's on that Mount Rushmore of rock music. We talked about that a few weeks back.
I have to agree. Yeah.
He's got to be on that. For my money, that's Peter Gabriel, Pete Townsend, Bob Dylan, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. As you know, I might throw Lou Reed up there. I certainly can't argue with your selections.
No, but just a great night of music, and worth the listen to if you haven't. There are some catchy tracks. I'm not gonna say the whole thing wasn't really difficult to listen to. There's some really poppy tracks on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Counting Out Time is a good track. As Bob mentioned, The Carpet Crawlers, which is a real signature Gabriel era Genesis song. The title track, of course. In the Cage, I thought worked really is a great live number as well.
Yeah, that was excellent. That was
In the,
excellent.
in the Cage is a
Yes,
tremendous
yeah.
Genesis song. So there's plenty of songs in there to do that. Definitely, that's an album, and I think you have to listen to it start to finish too. You can't cherry pick that record.
No, no, you have to listen to the whole thing. Similar to Close to the Edge. I think Sergeant Pepper. I think the songs on Sergeant Pepper are much stronger when you listen to the album in its entirety,
And not,
and
ju- you
not
know,
one song at a time. And they're all great songs, and
right,
I certainly listen to them once in a while, just a single song.
right.
You listen to something like Sergeant Pepper or Pet Sounds and Blonde on Blonde or Blonde on Blonde in its entirety. I think the songs are even stronger.
As a collective whole.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. Well, that's going to wrap it up. Bob, you have any last things to chime in here about the musical box? Plug it, or
No, I just want Steve Hackett to come back around again.
Oh yeah, there it is. There it
Signed by
is.
Steve Hackett when we saw him in person. That we got to meet him, and he performed selling England by the pound that night. So hopefully, either Steve Hackett or the musical box comes back with that record pretty soon, because that's probably my favorite Genesis record.
I have to agree with you. Start to finish, that is classic prog through and through. And I believe the musical box is coming back with that when they come back. I think next year. So
yeah, I think I thought incorrectly it was going to be Foxtrot, but I think you're right. I think it's going to be selling England by the pound. So obviously we're going to have to be there for that.
absolutely. Well, Bob, thanks for a couple minutes to recap a great night, and appreciate you coming on the show today.
Good to be with you, Andy. Take care.
All right, everybody, and you'll see me on the next episode of Two Legs, which will have next Saturday, which will have Luca Perazzi on. We interviewed Luca today, actually, for episode 212, where we talked about Paul's birthday, because we are recording on this is June 18th, so Paul is 81 today. And we discussed Paul's solo single Another Day and Oh Woman Oh Why, and broke those two songs down pretty deeply with Luca. So that'll be out on Saturday. So until then, we'll see you all next time.